Hi, hello, and welcome to the 7th episode of the Stage Manager Supply Co. podcast. We have no sponsor this episode, but instead are brought to you by Off-Brand Sticky Notes. Off-Brand Sticky Notes. Sure, they get the job done sometimes, but at what cost? My name is Claire, I am your host, and thank you for joining me today. As we start every podcast, I would first like to say that Black Lives Matter, and that I am creating this content on the traditional lands of the Kickapoo, Peoria, Potawatomi, Miami, and Sioux tribes. We will always start the podcast acknowledging the inequitable landscape and history of the United States, including but never limited to the fact that we are a country built on stolen land and developed on the backs of slaves. Stage Manager Supply Co. is my own attempt to bridge generations of systematic racism and oppression by making stage management arts education much more accessible. Today, I would like to highlight the Actors Fund. Founded in 1882, the Actors Fund serves all professionals, not just actors, in film, theater, television, music, opera, radio, and dance through programs that address our community's unique and essential needs. The Actors Fund fosters stability and resiliency and provides a safety net for performing arts and entertainment professionals over their lifespan. Personally, the Actors Fund helped me immensely during COVID with rental assistance when I needed it most. If you would like to learn more about the Actors Fund and donate what you are able, you can find the link to their website in the episode description. 2 disclaimers before I introduce today's guest. Disclaimer number 1. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host, Claire, and the guest, and do not reflect the official policy or position of any other agency, production, organization, employer, or company. Disclaimer number 2. The host is not presumed to be any sort of singular voice for stage management or stage managers. The views and opinions expressed by the host are extremely limited to the scope of her own experiences and are being widened each and every day. So, now that we've grounded our work in the reality of the world around us, let me introduce you to our guest. Our guest today is Karen Parlato. Karen is an equity stage manager based out of New York and the founder of Headset Chatter, a stage management-centric blog and Twitter account. A graduate of NYU's Playwright Horizon Studio Directing program, Karen has worked on Broadway as a sub-stage manager for Phantom of the Opera since 2004. Off-Broadway and in New York, she has worked with a variety of companies, including Amos Musical Theater, Crossroads Theater Company, Theater for the New City, La Mama, Labyrinth Theater Company, and many more. Karen has also toured with the Acton Company with multiple productions, and has an extensive resume of credits working regionally with the Regal Players and Ogunquit Playhouse. Karen is also the first guest I am interviewing on the podcast that I have never met in real life. I'm connected to Karen by one of my best friends and Stage Manager Supply Co. creative team member, Jonathan Bach. Karen, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, I'm so happy to be here.
How are you holding up during quarantine?
I'm doing okay. I've been in New York the whole time, and I don't go out a whole lot, so life has not changed very much since March 10th, which is kind of when I locked down. I enjoy being inside. I'm introverted, and it's kind of fun in a way to just sit in I spend a lot of time working out of town. So, in most years, I spend more than half the year away from home and not sleeping in my own bed. And this year especially was going to be incredibly busy and out of town for almost all the year. And now I'm going to be home for the whole year. So it's, I actually have been able to kind of make my apartment nicer and enjoy the time that I've had to be in my own home and make it a home and not just a place my suitcase lives. So, I've been trying to make the best of it, but I am really dying to get back to work. It feels like we don't have a purpose, and, this is what we do, and this is how we earn our living. And, I realized after this all had been going on a while, I have never in my life had a job that wasn't in theater. My very first job in high school when I was 16 was selling merchandise on Broadway. And, and I've done things that weren't stage management for very brief periods of time, but like I've never had a job that was in no way connected to theater, and it's like so weird to,
Yeah.
kind of face that.
I know it's a strange stopping resetting point, I feel like, for everyone. But I want to touch on something you just mentioned. Of your first job in high school was selling merchandise for it was Phantom, correct?
It was originally Phantom, and then some of the other related shows that we also worked, Les Mis, Saigon, like a lot of Scarlet Pimpernel.
Yeah.
There was a lot of them, but it started with Phantom, and it was mostly Phantom for a lot of time.
How did you get into arts and theater in your early life? Was it theater from the get-go? Were you an actor? How did you step into this world?
It started out when I was like really young, like 8 or 9. I sort of was leaning towards like TV or film. Like I wanted to be like a film director. Like when I was 9 or 10, I had a camcorder, and like I was going around the neighborhood like making movies, giving them a score and like a thing. And I was like, I'm gonna be a big movie director. And it was mostly just because I had been exposed to, I grew up near the city and had access to Broadway shows. It wasn't like I didn't know they existed, but it wasn't until I was 12 and I saw Phantom that like maybe I had the perspective to be like, oh, this is a thing you can do for a living that's different than doing film or whatever. And it was really it was actually like the overture of Phantom with all the drops and the music and everything that like really highlighted to me what the difference is between a musical and like a movie. That it's not about realistically representing reality. It's like you can kind of like, I don't know, like toy with people's emotions in a different way through the music and through these physical things that are in the room with you. And so that I was like, oh, I want to do that. So then I wanted to be a theater director. And as you said, I went to NYU for directing. And it wasn't until, well, all right, I should say along the way, between 12 and like 18, I was like, okay, so I'm going to be a director, and now I have to wait until I'm like a grown up and they let me start directing things. So the thing that I did for a lot of that time was stage management. And I did other things too when I was early in high school. Like the seniors were the stage managers. So like until I kept fighting to like try to be one of the stage managers. But I had these books that I got like in the drama book shop when I was like, 12 or 13 on stage management, just because I was buying books about everything, like not just directing. And I remember like reading one cover to cover during a science fair. And I was like, this sounds like such a cool career, but like, it's too bad I'm going to be like this big Tony winning director because I'll never get a chance to like do this other thing that sounds really cool.
Shoot.
And so like I did a lot of stage management through high school and really loved it, and was like, that would be awesome if I had 2 lifetimes to live. And then when I was in college, it just kind of didn't work. Like it didn't click somehow. And, whether that's my insecurity or maybe like just the truth of what would have happened, or the program was not at all focused on musical theater. Like Cap 21 was like the very high end, like musical theater school at NYU, but completely separate from the directing program. And so the only thing I can say about it is I was never artistically inspired by the stuff I was doing. I was working 7 days a week at that point after school, and it was like I was tired. I never got any sleep. Like that's one thing. Like I told Jonathan when he went to school, I'm like, just sleep. Like I know it's crazy and you want to be with your friends, but like if you sleep, you're actually gonna get more out of it than you're going to class on 3 hours sleep every single day. And so it, for whatever reason, I just felt like I don't see myself going out into the world and being a Broadway director. Like, I don't see how it happens for sure. I see it falling off the path in a numerous different ways that could end up with me being a community theater director and having to have like a regular person job and doing it as a hobby. And that wasn't what I wanted. But I could definitely see a path where I could be a Broadway stage manager. And it was something that I had always wanted to do if I couldn't for some reason direct. So I was like, you know what, like I want to do both these things, and I see one being very uncertain and another that I'm very confident I can do at the highest level. And so that's what I did, is like in the middle of school, basically, I didn't switch majors. They were very nice at playwrights, and I think they kind of sensed that I was a little bit of a, a misfit in the program. It wasn't quite like the star of the school, but they were great as far, because I was like, I want to finish my education in directing if I ever go back to it, and because it is such an academic pursuit, whereas stage management is much more learned by doing, I think. So I did finish my directing education, and I never went and doubled back and did like stage management classes. Like, we had to take one stage management class as directors that was just for directors. It wasn't like, like part of the stage management program. It was like the director's program stage management class. And I knew more about stage management already from, my studies and the pretty basic, like, this is how you call a cue, this is how you write blocking. So I really have no actual stage management education other than that. Although I do have a lot, because of the directing program, of like acting and voice and speech and movement and, design and all that kind of stuff that definitely informs everything that I do as a stage manager. But I have no education in stage management.
Sure. And so since you didn't have kind of like the formalized, oh, this is my professor, that's a connection for me. This is, an adjunct professor, they're a connection for me. How did you go about finding early mentors in your career in the field of stage management?
It was really hard. Like, that's the one thing, if people, can take from this, like, yeah, you don't need a degree in stage management to be a stage manager. That is true, but it was not easy because of that. Like,
that's fair. That's super fair.
I had my RA actually in my dorm my freshman year was a stage management major, and and I went to like Wicked when it opened, and there she is as like the PA or whatever. Like, I was like see her name in playbills and stuff, and it's like, okay, like that's I
cool.
shouldn't say I don't know how she got those jobs, but like that was what I was looking at, was like people coming out of the stage management program were clearly landing in very high profile positions. But I really did not have anybody, except that I happened to sell merchandise at this one show. And so
one little rinky-dink production.
So there's a little show I worked on called Phantom. I had worked there since I was 16, and they had seen me grow up, and they had celebrated my high school graduation, my college graduation, and when I was, so like, I knew people socially, I would help out with the Easter bonnet and the Broadway flea market and stuff, and I was on the softball team, and like, so there were, I wasn't working backstage, but I was in the like, the social community of the show. And so when I was, I guess 19 was when I decided that I was going to be a stage manager when I finished school. Like, the stage managers were so excited. They're like, yes, you're on our team, like, so they kind of, they were doing something. Craig Jacobs was, to answer the question of like where, who my mentors were, where I got them. Craig Jacobs was the PSM there for a very long time. And he was doing this like benefit, I think it was a benefit for the Actors Fund actually, that was like a Cameron McIntosh retrospective at like a hotel in Midtown.
Amazing.
And he was like, so when that all happened, he was like, okay, look, I'm doing this benefit. Like, I need like an assistant for the benefit. So like, why don't you do this with me? And so like, that was the first time that I was brought into anything that was, like a professional show on that kind of level. And it was cool. It was, it was just in like a ballroom in a hotel, but like, it was like Michael Crawford sang Music of the Night, Lea Salonga sang I Give My Life For You. The entire cast of the original production of Les Mis in costume came over from a theater on the bus and did One Day More. Like, it was, Dame Edna was there. Like, it was like star-studded benefit. And I was like, I didn't have a formal title, but I was like somewhere between an ASM and a PA, I guess. There was maybe one other person, but I can't even remember what they were doing. But like, I was like with Craig, and he, I was next to him when he was calling the show, and he would like kind of explain things about what he was doing and stuff. And I was running up to Dame Edna's room when she was getting, made up, and making sure, escorting her through the kitchens or whatever to get to the stage. And that was the first kind of door cracking open of, getting into the real world. But I was still, it was probably right after my sophomore year of college. And I did do, I stage managed a show for a friend who was in the directing program with me, who somehow got to direct a show off Broadway. But she, you know, it was this tiny little hole in the wall theater, and it was a new play that somebody had written, and like she just needed a stage manager and knew that I was into stage management. So that was actually the first time I was ever like paid to stage manage. And so you know, through that, you know, through Craig, he got me some interviews. A lot of times it didn't necessarily lead to a job.
Sure.
Right after I got out of school, I had an interview for one of the roundabout Broadway shows where like the PA is actually an ASM kind of situation. You know, they have that contract. And so like, that was like, I mean, that would have been incredible if I, you know, like literally had the interview like the day after I finished my last class or whatever. Did not get it. But, you know, that's how I kind of got my initial like connections, and just people kind of looking out for me and being like, hey, this thing might be right for you. And another person who was a mentor in a very different way was Brian Bogan, who does a lot of ASM work most of the time, Broadway and national tours and stuff. He was like a year older than me, and he was also a sub at Phantom. And like, he was the person I could go to with like, who was like almost a peer, but just a little bit more advanced. And so like, it was much easier to talk to him as an equal and be like, well, what about this? And what about that? And how's this going for you? And like, you know, like hearing about the part of the business that I needed to be involved with at that time. Cause like that's the biggest piece of advice I always give stage managers of like, what should you do to become a stage manager to be successful or whatever, is like the people that you think that you should be networking with, the people like the Craig Jacobs or like Ira Mont, or like you think, you know, like, oh my God, I've got this, you know, this connection to this person who has all this power. But those people, the people those people are hiring are not you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're so many rungs down the ladder below that person that they can't directly help you. They might be able to be like, a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend is doing this tiny off-Broadway show and needs a PA, and that's you. But like, the people that you need to network with are the people who are one step above you on the ladder, because those people turn down the jobs that you're qualified for. And so, you know, like Brian, my first job after I got out of school was, Brian was asked to do some festival show off Broadway for like, you know, $100. And he's subbing on Phantom, and he's got an off-Broadway show and whatever, you know, like he's not doing that anymore, but they call him because they got his number from somewhere. And he goes, well, you know, I can't do it, but if you're looking for somebody, you know, because the producers at that point are always like, oh my God, but we like you. And who are we going to get now? You know, you have this like sea of unknown people to choose from. And then they go, well, you should call my friend Karen, you know, and that, I find, in my experience, has been the thing that has led to jobs, is mostly just people who can't do the show because they're busy or whatever, and then they recommend you at kind of the same level. Which is not to say, you know, you could meet some Broadway PSM and they're doing a new show and they bring you on to PA and you become the first sub and that's it. Like, shaboopy. But like, it happens. It doesn't happen to me. So the alternative to that, like being in the right place at the right time, I think the slow, steady path is like, network with your friends who are around the same level as you, or they'll bring you on as an ASM, or you can bring them on as an ASM. And, you know, like making sure that you're not aiming too high or just focusing too high, and not including making sure that you're, you know, forging relationships with people around your same level.
Yeah, I mean, what you said, I mean, both, it's like a dichotomy, like getting struck by lightning or like working through the storm. And like, I've been struck by lightning once, but I've gotten, I can't do this, can you do this? Can't do this, can you do this? Multiple times. So I think I was so excited to have you say that on the podcast. I was like, this is the truth that everyone needs to hear.
Yeah.
I want to continue our through line of Phantom, because I know that's what the people want to hear about. Yeah. I want to hear about all of your regional experience as well. So that's coming up next. Mm-hmm. But how did you end up, you had this great mentor in Craig, you knew Brian, who was also subbing. So when did you get your equity card, and when did you officially become a sub on Phantom?
Yeah, so the distance between those two things is, I was still in school when, you know, Phantom kind of like, you know, took me under their wing. And Craig had a fantastic program where he would let people shadow and like, you know, shadow the deck or do the deck under supervision and stuff. And like, you really could get like a very good education in the show and just in, you know, Broadway backstage operations in general. And so, you know, I had done that. And so like I knew the deck by the time, you know, my summer between my sophomore and junior year were over, but I was non-equity. And so then it was kind of like I was like given a task of like, go get your equity card and you'll be a sub. You know what I mean? Like it was sort of this thing of like the connection exists, but I have to go out into the world on my own 2 feet and like, you know, flap my wings and like, you know, when I show that I can fly, then I have this Broadway show. And that was like very weird psychologically. Because it kind of made everything about the card, which is, you know, people get that way anyway, but like it made it was truth. It wasn't just like a hypothetical, you need to get your card. It was like literally the moment, does anyone want to give me my card because I have a Broadway show lined up? Which is, you know, incredibly lucky, you know, to be in that position at all. But I had a couple close calls. I had a PSM who wanted me as their ASM on an off-Broadway show. And it just didn't work out because a lot of the cast was non-ac and was getting their cards, and it just looked bad, like to add the ASM to that pile, I think. And so they were like, no, you just can't have that person. But you know, so that was one case. And then it was a good 2 years after that before I finally got it. But I will say one thing that leads to this is that every big break I've gotten has come from a connection that you wouldn't think, oh, that's the person I need to know to get my big break. You know, it wasn't like Craig, or it wasn't like, you know, a big producer I worked for, or like it was always some weird person. Like it would be like, you know, the press rep or the costume designer or the, you know, like it's not the person if you're trying too hard to schmooze the right people, you might be missing the boat, because it was always the people that you wouldn't think you had to schmooze to get your big job. And I will say this though, Craig got me a Broadway show, and the show got canceled before it ever started rehearsal. So it is not, you know, it is not to say that it never happened, but it never happened. But like, that is, you know, that was the one time that it was like, you know, this is the person you need to hire. And they were like, sure, don't know you, but okay. And like, got the job. And then the show never happened. But it was, you know, it was a long time of trying to find that card. And then what ended up happening is I did the Lincoln Center Directors Lab in 2002, and I did several shows in a row. Like it's like a festival. So like they gave me 2 shows, and then something happened and some show lost their stage manager that was also in the same venue. And they were like, or like our sound designer was shared between that show. And when their stage manager like disappeared, they were like, oh, and can you also do this third show? So like I did these 3 shows in the same venue at the same time, you know, within a month of each other, basically. And the person who really got me my card was the like venue manager, basically. And like, it was the kind of thing where I wouldn't have thought she saved my number, you know? And I figured like she had my number on a Post-it for the week I was there and then threw it in the trash. And like, I don't know how it happened, but the producer of the show that I got was looking for a stage manager, called the like artistic director of the other venue where I had done the show and said, who do you know that's the stage manager? And they were like, I don't know, let me talk to my like production manager or whatever. And somehow, I guess, she said Karen Parlato. And like, I would not have thought she would have ever remembered my name or kept my number or anything. And, you know, this guy calls me and is like, do you want to do the tour as a PSM? And I was like, yeah. I mean, it was a teeny tiny little tour, but it was hard starting equity as a PSM. And I had done, pretty much every show I've ever done has been under the equity umbrella in some way as like a showcase or whatever. So I was used to the basics of the equity system, but like it's hard when you're doing a real show, and we were touring in like venues that were not really meant to be equity venues. Like it was a drama show where like there were a lot of questions to be answered all the time, and you know, tactful things that you need to know the things beyond just the basics of how to do the job. You have to like know the complicated stuff. And I was, you know, 23 and like, just what do I do? And didn't have necessarily the network of mentors, like I said, like at the right age and experience level to be like, what do I do about this? You know? it was a real learning experience. And but you know, I got my card. That was the important thing. To answer your question, I got my card. The tour lasted about 4 months probably total, from like rehearsal to closing. And then I walked into the Majestic when I got back in town, and I was like, hey guys, I got my card. And they were like, great, next week is kind of busy. How about the week after Monday? And I was like, great. And so, you know, by the end of that week, I was fully trained, and I had retained a lot of what the show was before that, and some of it had changed. But, you know, I did my like week of, you know, training and shadowing and soloing and all that. And then from that point on, I was a deck sub. And then basically as soon as I could catch up, I was calling, and that's the rest is history.
Wow, that's such a beautiful story, Karen. And I know,
it's really cool. That's what I often get hung up on the phantom part of my life story, because it keeps coming around, and it's so kind of perfectly wrapped up in a little bow. And it's been kind of, you know, it's been sporadic in different ways. Like from 2004 to like 2007 or 8, like I was there a lot. Like I was there every week maybe. And then it kind of slowed down to like a couple times a year. And I, you know, that was always part of it, was like I had to go out and find my own jobs and my own career and stuff to, you know, to grow. And that made me less available to sub. And so, you know, it's like you fall down the list of available subs and stuff.
Yeah, that kind of ties into the next question I want to ask you is, outside of Phantom, you have this amazing resume of summer stock and regional experience. So how did you get your foot in the door into working in the regions, being someone based in New York and in these amazing summer stocks?
The really funny answer to that question is Phantom. Okay,
great.
So
it all comes back.
Yeah, as you said, like the majority of my early summer stock work was at Regal Players. And the way that I got that job was that 2 of the actors in Phantom were close, artists connected with that company. You know, like the summer stocks have their favorite artists they always bring back, you know. And so they were connected with that company, and they were doing shows there that season, and they needed a stage manager. And so the company had said to them, hey, do you know anyone through your Broadway connections or in New York or whatever who can do it? And so they thought of me and went to Craig and were like, hey, what do you think about, you know, is Karen right for this job? And he was like, yeah, sure. I will say everyone who tells the story takes credit for thinking of it themselves. But, you know, they're like, oh, I was the one who told them to hire you. But however it happened, they recommended me for it. And, you know, I went up, and I loved doing that kind of theater, and I love doing large musicals. That's really what it comes down to is, I love big shows and, you know, dance shows and just like things that are challenging from a stage management perspective. As a lover of theater, those are the kind of shows I get most excited about. And it's hard to do that in New York if you're not on Broadway. Like there's a lot of just smaller, you know, more intimate shows that are just a different kind of thing. There's nothing wrong with them. But like if your jam is like, you know, Carousel and 42nd Street and like, you know, that kind of thing, Mamma Mia or whatever.
Oh,
like,
Mamma Mia.
You're not gonna do that off Broadway. So, or off Broadway. So that when I kind of figured out that, like, you know, and to be a PSM too, that's part of it, is like, I have the opportunity to, you know, to stretch as a PSM of these large shows. And yeah, to do that, you have to leave the city, but it was really fun. And also, you know, spending my whole life in the city, like you sometimes just want a vacation, and I don't really take I've never in my life taken a personal vacation, but like to get to go to, you know, especially in the summer, I hate the city in the summer, to go to New England. And that's what all of my summer stock experience my whole life has been in New England. And
beautiful.
It's like partially a reason for that. It's like 5 degrees cooler. And, you know, especially like Algonquin is the other place that I work more recently. It's like, you're by the beach and there's lobster, and it's like, it is a bit of a paid vacation. Even like Regal, which is basically just in a suburb of Boston, having a car, being able to drive to a real grocery store and just load up your car with stuff and take it to your big apartment, like with an elevator, and carry your groceries up, like that's a vacation. And on top of that, you get paid well, you know, better than off Broadway pays. and you get to, you know, do these big shows that are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And so when I kind of discovered that, you know, I thought, like, this isn't a bad deal. Like, I can pay my rent, I have health insurance, and I'm doing shows that I love. Like, what's the problem? You know what I mean? Like, it almost, it's not that I don't want to do Broadway, but it definitely is totally fine. You know, like, I'm totally cool
Yeah.
with the fact that I'm not doing Broadway. I always think, you know, that's what I would say is, like, if I'm paying my rent and I have health insurance, then I'm successful. Like, that's
Yes.
like the baseline of, like, that's all it is you have a real job and you know, you can live doing what you want to do. So, so I really kind of fell in love with that, and the pace of it, and like having, you know, you got a different show every month or whatever it might be, and it's definitely a skill set that I'm very proud of. And I think, you know, some people kind of think of it as like, oh, summer stock or whatever, but like, it's a skill. Like, sometimes
Yeah.
you get those Broadway people who are like, wait, what? How do we, what? I can't, you know,
It's
but like, it's a developed skill of how you rehearse a show in 10 days and tech a show in 2 days. And, you know, it's something that I'm happy to have made kind of the central point of my career.
Yeah. So I have some questions about that process of putting a show up so quickly. So are these shows that you're doing regionally, do they tend to be new versions of older shows, or do they tend to be remounting, like renting a set, renting costumes? What do you find, and what tips and tricks do you have for doing both?
Yeah, it totally depends, especially like Algonquin, for instance, does all of what you just said at different times. And they're really trying to become kind of like a Paper Mill or a La Jolla that really develops brand new shows for Broadway. They had two actually on the docket this year that got canceled. But so I've had an opportunity to kind of do a variety of that. Like, I did last year, I did 42nd Street with Randy Skinner directing, which was amazing. And
So cool.
I love tap shows. I've done 42nd Street. This is my third time doing it. And I'm kind of obsessed with Randy Skinner. So like, when that was, you know, one of the
Perfect.
options, I was like, yes. But that's an example of, he actually was directing it himself for the first time. So it wasn't, to say it was a copy of the Broadway production is actually less true than some of the other shows I've done there have been. But it was his choreography and stuff. So it's, you know, in that case, the gist of it is it was a set they bought from somewhere else, and, you know, and him, you know, more or less recreating what we know 42nd Street to be. On the sort of opposite end of that, I did the regional premiere of American in Paris the year before. And that was a totally different production where it was a completely new concept from the Broadway production, and
Interesting.
really was pushing the boundaries. And it was part of what R&H were the rights holders on it, and part of what they wanted. They did a little mini documentary on our production to show it doesn't have to be this ballet that's like very intimidating for theaters thinking they're trying to put it, you know, can we put it on? Can our audience, you know, take it? Will it attract an audience?
Digest.
And to be like, yeah, like you have to, you know, reconceive it to show that it can be something other than that. And so that was a case where we were very purposely making very different decisions than they made on Broadway. And it really was its own thing other than just, you know, the basics of the text and the score. And it was very well received, and it was really fun to be part of something that was, you know, it's an existing show, but it's trying something totally that isn't the copycat of the original production. And then there have been times when, you know, like when we did Sister Act, it was fantastic. It was like the Jerry's Acts production of Sister Act restaged, you know, by the original, I guess, PSM. And so, you know, resident directors come in and they reset a show that they've done. So it kind of all depends. Kinky Boots we just did last year was the, you know, the production of Kinky Boots set by one of the original dance captains. And so, and with the first national set. And so, you know, those productions are real, like, copy and paste of the Broadway productions, which I think is fascinating. I mean, you know, there's a lot of like, well, this is how we did it on Broadway, but I find that cool. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's actually really fun. Like, just from a historical perspective, I always call it like watching the DVD with the commentary on when stuff like that happens, because it's like, you know, you're there, and as you're going through the show, the people who created it are like, yeah, and then this happened, and this wasn't originally in the show, and it was added because this, and in rehearsal, this person said this funny thing, and that's why this is like this. And, it's really cool to, to see the history of all that and to get it from the people who were involved. And it's also really fun to like make up something that's totally your own.
Yeah, that's why I love ballet so much, I think, because when you get to like see some of these older ballet masters and like know their lineage of where this piece came from, it's like, wow, you're modern history as an embodied person. So our good friend Jonathan Bach, who I've mentioned many times, he has been telling me for years about your FileMaker database. And I didn't mention this in my intro, but I will when I record it, so you won't even know. But Karen runs a blog and a Twitter account called Headset Chatter, where she documents all of her stage management adventures and documents a lot about her technology game. And I think you probably are the most tech-savvy guest I have and will ever have on the podcast. So I would love if you could kind of give us like a layman's explanation of what FileMaker is, what its benefit is for stage managers, and then what does your database look like and what does it do for you besides everything?
The first thing I will say is sort of a caveat to that, is that in the last 2 years, I've actually switched away from FileMaker, and I'm now developing from scratch a Mac app that will hopefully someday be an iPhone, iOS compatible app that basically does the same things as what a FileMaker stage management database would do. So this can all kind of apply either way. But it's, because it's completely just an app that you create out of thin air, you can do anything with it and not just, the kind of, but what FileMaker does is it does all the hard behind the scenes stuff for you and allows you to kind of create what can, really feel like an app, especially if you use like scripting and stuff, you can automate a lot of your tasks. So basically, to go through like the kind of things it does is it has kind of different sections. And like, for instance, there's a section for the report. So, you can write your report in it. And it also, it's kind of like, if you think of it as like a spreadsheet, but with a lot more power to decide how the information is presented at any given time and to manipulate that information or sort of do calculations off of it in a way that's more flexible and easier to change the layout of than a spreadsheet. So like if you took 10 different spreadsheets with all the information about your show and like, poured it into a computer and like, and we're like, tell me what the average runtime of my show was over the last 10 days. And it was like, that's the difference. So, so like the report section, you could like search for, in how many times in the prop notes have I mentioned a knife, and it like you could bring something like that up. Or, certainly I have it so that you push a button when the show starts, you push a button when Act 1 ends, you push a button when Act 2 starts, you push a button when Act 2 ends, and you never have to deal with the math on the time. And then one of my favorite, like, kind of useless features, but not entirely useless, is to take, like I said, to take the runtimes, figure out what the average runtimes of each act are for the last 10 shows or 5 shows or however you want to do. The longer the show runs, the more you can kind of, flatten that average. And so you can have a thing where, like, if you're in the middle of Act 1, you push a button and it'll be like, this act will end at 9:35:16 and there is 22 minutes and 14 seconds remaining in the act. So like, it helps if you're like, how long, God, I have to pee, like, how long do I have? Or one thing that's like a legitimate use of it is like, when on the road and house management is like, I need to tell the ushers when to be back for intermission. Like, when do you think it'll be? And I'd be like, I think it'll be at 9:16:45. And if your show is like reasonably accurate, like, and not crazy variable, it's accurate within a couple seconds once it gets some good data in there. So that's something that's like just a fun kind of like bonus feature you can do fairly easy with it. I also had it for a while. I've gone through several different phases of it where there's been features that have been added or taken away. I had it for a while where it could text me when it was time to call half hour or 15 replaces, or especially at intermission. That's really handy because you can't just look at the clock and say, oh, it's 7:30, I need to call half hour. Like, it would figure out, okay, well, the act ended, you want a 15-minute intermission here, and this is what time you should call. The problem was, this was back in like 2008 when it had that feature, and like Wi-Fi was not that reliable. Like, your computer has to be on the Wi-Fi. wherever you are. It has to be open and running and plugged in probably. And, you know, your cell phone has to have service. And like back in 2008, like on the road, all those things being true were almost never. And half the time,
Never.
it wouldn't come in. I'd be like, where is it? And then like, you know, 5 minutes after the act starts, it's like, boop, call 5. It's like, all right, thanks. But nowadays, I actually think nowadays that will be really cool. That's not a feature I've yet built back in, but I'm kind of close to that in my like development cycle. And so it does that kind of thing. It can handle, you know, schedules, which is, you know, making a schedule. It never had the ability to do a multi-column, you know, multi-simultaneous room schedule before, but that's something that I'm adding like right now. Like that's the current kind of project. And I, you know, so for that I would use Word, you know, table Word and stuff up until now, but I'm hoping that I can get it to a place where I can use it. Because when it did do like, when I was doing plays, like single column schedules worked great. And it would do stuff like kind of calculate the equity rules, like, you know, are there more than 5 hours before a meal break? How long is the meal break? How long is the day? How, you know, like figuring out that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it would just like something would pop up in red if it doesn't match the rules, or if you've not used all your hours, it would pop up in yellow or something. You know, there was one time it caught me and I was like, what is it talking about? I was like, there's a bug in this app because the schedule is fine. And like after about 10 minutes of that, I was like, oh no, I messed it up. There's an extra, you know, half an hour in the day. And like, you know, so like that's something that's sort of the like bonus stuff you can do. But I mean, in basics, you can, you know, you can keep your contacts in it. I use it to sort of auto email. So, you know, you can do something very simple like email the entire female ensemble, and like it'll, you know, it can make an email list out of any criteria that you want to give it. Also conflict, which can lead to a, you know, auto-generating your in-out and importing that also into the report, tracking like sick days and stuff, and, you know, that kind of thing.
So it's for people who may not be as versed as you and I are, and I say myself very lightly. FileMaker is a database system where, like Karen said, you import all of your info from the show, and then through coding, you are able to generate. I'm not a coder, and I have questions for you on how to code and how to learn to code because I need to learn more. But you can basically finesse the program to take the place of Word in creating your schedule, and every day put in the info that you would into Word, and then click one button, as Karen said, and it emails it. It puts it into a PDF, it prints it for you, all within one automated system. And so everything Karen is saying, my eyes are like so wide because I built a FileMaker in 3 days for a it was a great Broadway show. It was the show I got my card on, and they used it to send the reports, and I was like, wow, I've made it as an adult. But I'm always interested on people who are really good at it, and how did you learn to code? How did you get into all of this computer stuff?
It probably started when I was 8 and I was in gifted camp taking computer programming classes. But there was a long gap there. Before, so I've always kind of been interested in it, but like it wasn't like a straight unbroken line from that point. Yeah. But and I feel like I'm not great with math, so I feel like sometimes it takes a while for a programming language to kind of sink in for me. I don't know if those skills are related, but they kind of feel like they are. And so I learned around the time like I was doing the website, like I learned HTML, which is like, you know, website language, and CSS, which is layouts for websites, which is it's not a fully featured coding language, but it starts to put you in the right mindset for that at least.
Yeah.
And I tried, when I was on tour, I had a production manager who was touring with us who programmed in JavaScript, and he was trying to like get me to learn Java, and like, you know, he gave me like his big book to like read on the bus and stuff, and that never quite sunk in. Maybe it will someday. But what ended up happening is I made so many like false starts at like attempting to, you know, to learn different programming languages. And I'm primarily a Mac user, so I was interested in the new languages coming out for, you know, for iOS and for Mac. And it was when I was doing a show a few years ago, and one of the PAs on the show just told me about this website called Udemy, which is not just for coding, but it's like a site where you can learn a skill. Basically, like there's paid courses, and you can, pick whatever skill you want to learn, and like there's a course with a video tutorials about, that'll take you through the process of learning that. And so he had a lot of luck finding some good courses for coding, and they were really cheap. They were on sale, and so I was like, oh my god! So I kind of started that, and that was what finally sort of broke through to like being able to do stuff where you reach that point where you're no longer just following the instructions in the tutorial. You actually understand how it works, and you can kind of branch off from there. So once I finally reached that point, then I started, I made a couple simple apps just to kind of like, get my feet under me. And then eventually was like, all right, I feel comfortable enough now that like, I want to start turning the database into an app that like I can actually stop using FileMaker and start using that. Because the thing about FileMaker, like you said, is it's a program that allows you to build a database, but it doesn't build anything for you exactly. It handles the like real back-end code, but you still have to know how to program it to do anything. And so, like you could program it to like run inventory for a shoe store or whatever, and it doesn't know whether you're trying to do that or whether you're trying to stage manage a show or to give it everything. And so the thing about FileMaker is it's a lot easier to use than like writing a whole app from scratch, but it's fairly expensive. It's like $300-ish. There's a couple different variants of it, but everyone that's using it has to have a license. So if you've got it and your ASM has it, your PA has it, and like, nope, you can't access the information without everybody having a license. And that starts to raise the cost, especially where like, if you use it and you own it, that's fine. But then do you expect everyone who, you're doing a showcase and like, is your PA who's making $20, a Starbucks card for their whole payment, going to buy the $300 app to be able to check your paperwork? And so, so for one reason, I wanted to get away from that. And also the sort of online like sharing server features are like enterprise level. Like you have to pay thousands of dollars to have like the server hosting version that allows everyone to access the database from anywhere at all times. Otherwise, your options are limited to being on the same Wi-Fi network, basically, which works in rehearsal, but you're then in a situation where once you're home, it's hard. You're like, okay, I'm using the file on Dropbox. I'm going to sign off. You can use it now. And like, you have to be really careful about versions and stuff at that point. It's not really how it's meant to be used. So that was kind of what pushed me to be like, I would like to find a way out of FileMaker and into something that's more flexible, that I control completely, and I'm not at the mercy of like, also like things happen where it's like you get a couple versions out of date and it's like, okay, this version of FileMaker no longer runs on the current operating system, so you have to upgrade for another $200 or whatever to be able to continue using it. And so I just was trying to get away from that. And I don't discourage people from doing that unless you want to learn to code full apps, which I don't think is necessary to get your paperwork in order. But that's what kind of pushed me to trying to find my own solution. And I got to the point where at the beginning of last season, I was able to use the app like on its own without FileMaker to run,
amazing
professional shows, and nothing went wrong. I mean, every now and then there'll be like something, but like it never, knock wood, like there was never a moment where it was like, oh my god, it's not working and I can't do this thing that I need to do right now. It's always been easy to do, thank god, which is just luck, really. I mean, I could totally mess with it and break it somehow and it would be a disaster, but I was proud that like it was in a condition where I felt comfortable. And through that season I was slowly adding pieces to it. It was like, okay, it's the report and it's whatever, and then conflict didn't work, but it's like, whatever, we're doing summer stock, nobody has conflict. Like we're writing for 10 days, like it's fine,
we're all here.
I can write them on a piece of paper.
But I will be the first person in line virtually to buy the app when it goes live on the App Store. So don't you worry about that. You'll have one sale.
I don't want to get people's hopes up. I mean, I would love to sell it, and that's the thing. Like, I don't give away the database because it was always like, you could sell this. It's like, yeah, but then like you have to do all the you have to clean it up. So like,
it's a whole process
and keep supporting it. And like, if you take people's money, then you really need to work. it would be great to someday sell the app, but I always say, I'm like, that's like 10 years away. Like,
yeah, that's
because at
fair.
first I have such broad dreams of like all the things it's going to be able to do.
Yeah.
And, you know, to get it to a point where it's got all the things I want, and because that's really what it is it's for me. Like it's not that it couldn't be used by someone else. And I have told Jonathan that he can be, you know, a beta tester if he wants whenever we get back to work. But maybe you too. I don't know. But if you understand that, like, it might not work, you know.
Yeah,
but,
no.
Because it is fairly stable. It's just not pretty, you know. It's like, it's not,
sure.
you know, it's not refined and it's not reliable.
Yeah.
I mean, it's reliable enough, but for me,
but it's for you, which I think is great.
Yeah, but yeah, my goal in doing it is that I'm, like you said, like, I'm a technological person, and that makes me kind of lazy in the sense of, if I know something can be automated and it's not, it's frustrating.
Do it. Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, like you said, like, the one click to send a report at the end of the night, that, like, you know, what it does usually for me is it runs like an idiot proofing, which is like, if your report is missing like a piece of information that's absolutely essential to the report, like one of the run times or the general notes about the performance, or, you know, filling in, depending, it has options for, like, do you put in the house count or the house manager for that company? You know, if you're missing a required option, it'll stop you. If there's, you know, the runtime is negative because one of the times was before the other time that shouldn't be, you know, it'll do that kind of check for you. It'll address the, you know, the email to the report list, and, you know, paste the HTML. I like to do it as pasting HTML in the body and then attaching the PDF. So it's both, you know, people can see it right away in their email and they have the PDF. And, you know, attaching all of that. And then I don't, you know, like, addressing the subject line, you know, name of show, date, matinee, evening, you know, whatever that is, so that you know, you've got that all there. Doing the same thing with the schedule, if, you know, on the versions of the database that have been able to do schedules. And, you know, then you hit send, whatever, it takes the PDF, it puts them in the correct folder in your Dropbox, and you're, you know, like for instance with the Gunquit, we use a stage management Dropbox. It's just my Dropbox. And then the company has Google Drive. So one copy of the PDF gets uploaded to the correct folder on my Dropbox, and the other copy gets uploaded to the folder where they want the reports for the company. And, you know,
amazing.
It's one, because I remember when they started the Google Drive, was maybe, I guess, my first season, but it didn't happen right away. It was like one day they were like, oh, by the way, can you start putting the PDF in this folder in the Google Drive? And I was like, what? But
a whole nother step.
I pressed one button. And so it was, you know, an hour or two of coding to get to the point where pressing that one button would also add it to the Google Drive. And you know, now the database supports 2 different upload sources, but it was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do?
Oh, crazy. I do wanna wrap up our conversation by asking for a production story from you of your funniest, scariest, sweetest, whatever you would like to share story from a production that you were a part of.
Okay. So this is a thing that happened when I was doing Sister Act at a Gunquit.
Oh, amazing.
So we're in the run. I love Sister Act. We're in the run, and we're about to start the show one day, and I'm about to check in. I'm trying to check in with the conductor, you know, prior to the show, and he's like, you know, fiddling with the keyboard and not really paying attention. And eventually, like, you know, he gets on and he's like, I'm having an issue here. Hold on, you know, and then it becomes like, okay, I need someone from sound down here. And so they go down, they can't fix it, whatever. Like, as it turns out, there's 2 keyboards and he's playing keys 2. And then, you know, there's like the other keyboard is who's playing keys 1. So keys 2 is messed up, like the main stage computer is down. And what keys 2 does basically on that show is like the church bells and the musical gunshots that are in the chase scenes, and like, you know, more of the kind of like effects sort of based stuff. So we have like the main keyboard that's going to be like, you know, the melody and stuff. But so he's not going to play his keyboard for the show, which is kind of cool, because like most of the shows I do, the music director is, you know, playing, and they're not able to conduct with a stick. So it was kind of fun that, you know, he was able to really conduct. But nevertheless, the problem as it pertained to me was the musical gunshots, because in Sister Act, there are two chases in the show, one in Act 1 and one in Act 2, where the bad guys are running around and they're like, you know, they're shooting on the beat and there's a whole thing. And it's like, if you don't have some kind of gunshot there to do that, then it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so, so as the sound engineer is, she's going back to the booth, you know, to get ready to go front of house to do the show. She stops by, she's like, it's not working, I don't know what we're gonna do. And she's like, okay, so for the gunshot, why don't you just tap the God mic? And like, cause I had like, it was like an actual microphone that was like hanging next to the calling desk. So she's like, just, you know, on the gunshots, tap the God mic. Now, the first lesson of this story is that I knew from early on in the process I wasn't calling these gunshots. There was like one gunshot way at the end of the show that was called. But I always kind of was like, I'm going to make sure I know how to call these gunshots, because they're very, like, the first chase is not that long. The second one is like 15 pages of score, and like they're all in, you know, like you have to know how to count it and know where you are and stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to make sure I know how to call this, because I can just see a situation where something happens and we end up doing it manually, and I need to know how to call this. So I actually, I think, called the first one off the score because it was really short. And the second one, I kept the full like 15 pages or whatever in the back of my book. They weren't, you know, I didn't use them to call. I had like counts or some, you know, some similar version in the actual calling script. But in the back of the script was that thing of score, just in case something like this happened. So, so she's like, okay, so just hit the God mic. So we do Act 1, and the woman who had been our PA was now like on the deck crew or whatever. So she kind of stood in front of the mic and like kind of stepped back so that like people didn't walk by, and she could shush people as the mic was hot and stuff. So we did that, and you know, on the gunshots I would smack the mic. And the general consensus was that it sounded like someone farting. But from what I could hear from off stage, like it sounded like something. I feel like if you saw someone take a rubber gun and go like that, you would know what it was meant to be. But apparently it didn't sound all that great. So at intermission, they come back, they work on the computer for another, you know, 20 minutes or whatever. They still can't get it going. And so the A1 comes back, and she's like, okay, so it sounded all right, but like it still wasn't. I was like, I know it sounded like someone farting. And so she's like, okay, for Act 2, just take the mic and slam it on the table. And I was like, that was very, I was like, what? Really? She was like, yeah, she's like, I'm not kidding. Like, she's like, it's a, you know, it's a durable mic. We have more, like, it'll be fine. Just really smack, like, don't go easy on it. Just smack it on the desk. And I was like, okay. And so we do the chase, and like I, you know, had it out of the thing and like had it on. I found like a nice like kind of resonant corner of the desk. Like, you know, the wood wasn't like supported underneath. And like we went through the chase, and I was just like, bam! And the first time I did it, like one of the guys in the, you know, like the little bad guy group in the show, like runs by after that gunshot, and like when he was, you know, was circling around again, he comes by and he's like giving me the thumbs up. I'm like, yes. So it worked, and the mic apparently was fine, and
wow,
like gunshots is what I understand. So it was just a really fun story of like something crazy that, like, you know, we had to improvise and, you know, experiment, and
I think you are now legally a Foley artist, so congratulations.
Yes, that was the thing. It was like, it was really fun to do that.
Amazing. Well, Karen, thank you so much for sharing all of your time and stories with me today. I had such a great time talking to you.
Me too. I'm so glad you've been on.
End of pod.
With that, we have come to the end of episode 7 of the Stage Manager Supply Co. podcast, once again brought to you by Off-Brand Sticky Notes. Off-Brand Sticky Notes. I just cough up the extra cash and buy the real ones. It always works out better. A huge thanks to Karen for sharing her experiences with me, and a huge thanks to you for listening. I am still on my quest to become the Howard Stern of arts education, and one day I hope I will be like Moana and retrieve the heart of the ocean. Again, if you would like to signal boost or support the Actors Fund, their website will be linked in the episode notes. If you enjoyed the podcast, please feel free to rate, review, and subscribe to us on your chosen podcast platform. Thank you again for listening, and I will catch you on the next one. Bye!